Hello and welcome to the Sofia International Film Festival Talks. Once again, we have the opportunity of meeting the people who make films. This is the one thing of film festivals that you can't and that you shouldn't be taking away. This year we celebrate our 25th anniversary, and it has been some incredible 25 years. I have to admit that I'm not older enough than this to remember the beginning, but still the Sofia Film Festival has been present for a long time, and we're really happy to have the opportunity to adapt to things, because as we know, if something doesn't adapt, it just goes away. The same goes not only for festivals, but also for cinema. And speaking of adaptation of tradition and the way we perceive normality, I have today with me Alexander Camilleri, director of the film LUZZU. Hi, Alexander.
Hi, Stefan. Thank you so much for having me here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So it's a sunny afternoon in Sofia right now, but I see that you're somewhere dark and probably cold. Where do we find you?
I'm in New York City, and we've just been blasted with the wind. So it's about 11 degrees Fahrenheit here. So I don't know, 4 or 5 degrees centigrade, cold.
Well, speaking in Celsius, here it's around 20. So we consider ourselves lucky not only to have your film, but also the better weather. In the day that
through my film, there's the Maltese sun in my film that I'm getting.
Well, we're going to talk about this Maltese sun, but just to have a quick reference, on the day that we are recording this interview, this is the first day that cinemas in New York City open for a very long time. Are you going to the cinema today? Or not?
I won't be going to the cinema. I won't be going. I'm actually in my own apartment cutting a film cinema on a screen.
Well, it is interesting. One would think that once things reopen, people would rush into them, but actually the very necessity of experiences and content has changed a lot in the last year and a half, almost 2 year and a half, I would say. When we talk about your film, this is actually something that we would be referencing to. It's a film about the way things we perceive as normal disappear and the way we adapt. Why is this topic important for you?
Well, my story, which focuses on this traditional Maltese fisherman who is born and raised in a very rich culture and a tradition that's steeped in beauty and has such a connection to the history of the Maltese Islands. While he's brought up in this environment, he comes of age in a time when Malta is rapidly industrializing, and the world really doesn't have a place for him anymore. And while I don't necessarily have a personal connection to fishing in Malta, in fact, prior to this film, I'd never gone fishing before in my life. I nevertheless had an emotional connection to what Jesmark goes through. It seems that, for one, growing up in an immigrant family, because my parents emigrated from Malta to the United States, growing up, it seemed to me that immigrant families often have to make choices about what to hold on to from their past and what they have to let go of in order for their children to succeed. And those choices are not always easy. And I saw my parents kind of grapple with it. They wanted to hold on to this beautiful island that they came from. But at the same time, they realized that for us to prosper in a new environment, it meant that our lives wouldn't necessarily be different. So there's a lot of pain, I think, with those choices. But there's beauty, because transformation can be liberating. But you have to have the right perspective, and the journey that Jesmark goes through is a kind of a transformation, and he has to come to terms with what it will actually mean to let go of his past, but what might be beyond that, and how he can fulfill his duties as a father to a new generation and redefine his family life. So just from a story standpoint, I really respond to these moments in our lives that are complex, because life doesn't often have easy answers, and that pain and beauty could be wrapped up all in the same choice. And that's what I hope we're able to express with this film.
Pain and Beauty is particularly well put. Your film is really beautiful. It is set on a beautiful location where many films have already been made. At the same time, you seem to be, it seems both as an art house film, but also it has this particular naturality in the presence of the actors. And I was really surprised to find out that actually Jesmark himself, Jesmark Shikluna, he was a real fisherman. He was not an actor prior to the film.
That's correct, yeah. Jesmark had never been on camera, had no plans on being in films until the moment that I walked up to now. And it's a credit to what he does in this film. It's an amazing performance. I would really put it up there against, the best trained actors. And what it tells me is that there's something about cinema in which the camera has is a knife, and it pierces through falseness. And there are different ways of trying to get past, this this feeling of things being fake. And we know it when we see films and we don't believe it. And you can be a very well-trained actor and make us believe. Or, you can also be someone like Jesmark, who is not trained, but has an openness of the spirit and gave himself over to the film. And I was able to write the character very closely to him. And in that way, the performance is, it's so steeped in reality that we can tell that these emotions are very true, because everything is written very closely to his real experience. Jesmark is a real fisherman. At the DNA, in the DNA of this film was that I had to work with non-actors. There would really be no way to do this film properly with a trained actor, because what we're trying to get to is something that goes beyond the edges of the frame, so to speak. Jesmark has been on a boat since before he could walk, right? And all of that needs to come out through the character, through their physicality, be able to believe it. And so training a fisherman to be an actor is, a much easier job, because I already had this history of fishing built into, his very, cells. And there's, that's a much harder task for an actor to try to embody that life, the physicality, the expertise, and just the sensibility about what it means to be a part of this world.
True, but in the very essence of your creative process, when did the script come? Before or after you met Jesmark?
Well, I tell you, I had kind of the outline of a script, and I, upon meeting Jesmark, I had to go back and rewrite the script significantly. But that's okay, because this kind of film is, it's really nourished by the reality around you. And so you can't come in with a script, even if it was a fully formed script on the page at that moment. I would have needed to tear up the carpet. Once you cast, you have to rewrite the characters for the cast. You can't stick kind of dogmatically to the words on page, because you'll fail in making this kind of film. It really benefits from the more of the ingredients that you can grab from the real world, maybe it's the people, maybe it's the location that you find just a couple days before shooting, maybe even on the day an accident happens, something you were not expecting. The more that you can fold that into the process, the better this kind of film becomes. And so I was all too glad to go back and once I spent some time with Chesmark and David, who's the other lead fisherman, once I got to know them, it made my writing so much better because I could, imagine into their reality and tee them up for success, because now the characters were written with them in mind. And so they were not going to have to like stretch very far, and, they could do things that were very close to the experiences of their own lives.
True, but it is also fascinating to think from the other perspective that your film is named after one of the most popular souvenirs that someone can get from Malta. I mean, LUZZU is it's a symbol. It's a postcard. It is it is something that we could also perceive to be as fake as it can be, and this of course is reapplicable to any cultural context. Malta being this special place where many people go to, but not that many people live in. Which brings me to the next question. It is an interesting contradiction. Malta is the set of so many films, especially Hollywood blockbusters, and they could be as amazing as they can, but films in Malta are not made that often. So your film is one of the very few Maltese films made at all. So how do you make a film in Malta?
Yeah. Well, what you're saying is, again, part of the very DNA of this project. It's still a very rare idea to make a film about Malta with Maltese people in the Maltese language. It's a shockingly rare idea, unfortunately. There are many reasons that the local Maltese film industry is not developed in the way as other countries, even similarly sized, smaller nations. But the contradiction is really startling, because there is so much filmmaking activity on the island, and Malta has substituted and portrayed many other countries, or even foreign extraterrestrial worlds. It's somehow it's played everything else except itself. So part of the project of this was, one, I wanted to see Maltese films. Since I've been growing up, I assumed at some point I would start seeing them, and they never really came. So obviously, my motivations first and foremost are personal, and what do I want to express, and what do I want to say through the characters. But I cannot deny that underneath all of that was a really burning fire in me and my producing partners, was to do something that had never really been done before. And it was as much of a, it was just a very rich artistic opportunity, which was to say something about Malta. You commented that, the LUZZU itself, which is the traditional boat of the fishermen, is ubiquitous on the island. You hardly go anywhere without seeing them. You might see them in the water, but you could see them in the tourist shops, and they're kind of a fixture. Well, this is an opportunity to get beneath the surface, and you can come to Malta and you can see these colorful boats and take them at the surface level, and they look very nice, and you can somehow take that away. But what we got to do was get under the skin of these characters, that we could get to the soul of our people. And somehow we have to say it out loud, and it seems very radical, but this is what every other country does, and my kind of thesis at the beginning of this was, I'm not going to try to explain Malta. We don't need to explain ourselves. I don't need a title at the beginning of the film telling you where on the planet Malta is, because many people don't know. I just want to take it as a matter of fact that these people have lives and souls that are worthy of sharing on this screen, and anyone in the world can sit down and watch this movie and enjoy it. And that was, you know, the license that we gave ourselves. And you know, if you're going to tell a story about Malta, I think there's no better place to start than with the fishermen, because we are, you know, seafaring people, and those boats are indeed iconic to the Maltese islands, and somehow I think are really tied to the soul of the people.
True, but getting also putting aside the very the very existential aspect of the LUZZU that you describe, your film, which has incredibly beautiful cinematography, I have to admit, also portrays a lot of food. Food is one of the things that we see the most nowadays. When we speak of when we think of a beauty shot nowadays, we think as much as of food as of anything else. So all this amazing fresh fish, those herbs and spices being cut, being cooked, full of colors, full of life, and at the same time being in a way illegal, because this is a story of illegal fishing as well, and the way it is. I wouldn't say produced, but rather incented by the application of law. So how does a seafaring nation, the way you put it, cope with modernity? How do you, is it possible
Well,
to sustain a certain identity if it is indeed rooted into something, while at the same time being um, a lawful part of the modern world?
yeah, well, the question is very much central to the film, and it's one that I think reverberates in so many different countries, in many different contexts, which is how to reconcile tradition with modernity. You know, it's very central to the plot of the film, but you know, there were other ways that we were able to express this tension. For me, one of the big uh, ways that we do this was in the locations. So you'll see that the camera does not shy away from the kind of the chaotic sides of the island, which, again, a foreign production coming to Malta would never show the aspects of the rapidly modernizing um, sides of the island. They would only go and shoot the postcard and beauty shots. But for me, it was really important that we saw, you know, Malta in its transformation. And one of the key locations that was, you know, big inspiration for me was something called Pretty Bay. And despite its name, it's anything but pretty. Maybe once upon a time it once was, but now there's an enormous shipping free port that looms over this otherwise very idyllic bay with turquoise water and just, you know, really a beautiful shoreline. And there's a, you know, there's a key conversation between the husband and the wife character halfway through the film, and they're kind of, they have a competing theory over what their child needs in order to succeed. You know, the tension between them is the child going to be like the father, or is the child going to be like the mother? And it's a very heartbreaking conversation because there's no easy answer. And looming over them is the shipping free port. Behind everything is the promise of capital, of another kind of Malta that's racing into the future. And that, critically in the story, Jesmark, if he changes his mentality, he could be a part of that and he could share in those riches. Of course, it's going to come at some kind of cost. So, you know, all those ideas, you know, were very important, and it is indeed what the story is about. And I hope that we were also able to express it in these visual ways, and you know, steep the audience may never have been to Malta, but steep them on an island that they would otherwise never see, even, you know, if they travel there for a vacation.
Speaking of seeing, LUZZU has, just like most films produced that were released in the last year and a half, a very peculiar fate so far. It has been shown at the Sundance Film Festival and it has been awarded the World Cinema Dramatic Special Jury Award, and it was also nominated for the Grand Jury Prize, which is a great recognition of the film. But at the same time, have you seen it in a cinema yourself? It has been impossible to go to the cinema for most of 2020.
Yeah. No, I've not seen it in the cinema. I have not even seen it with more than one other person in a small room. And so I'm very jealous of this audience at the great Sofia International Film Festival. I wish I could be there.
We wish that too. We'll send you a picture at least. And I would like to wish you to have the opportunity to see it on a big screen as soon as you can. And for everyone who's watching, you do have the opportunity to see LUZZU at Cinema House and also online as a part of our 25th anniversary hybrid edition here at the Sofia International Film Festival. Thank you, Alexander Camilleri, for taking the time for this interview.
Thank you so much. It's an amazing honor to be a part of this festival and with such a tremendous legacy, and happy 25 years.
Thank you. We wish you all the best.